Hi and welcome. I'm Iris Benrubi, your host on Building Relationships in Isolation. And today I'm really excited to have Raphael Cushnir. Welcome to the call, Raphael.
Thanks. Great to be with you.
Yeah, Raphael, if you don't know, is a master in managing our emotions. I've interviewed him so many times. I love what he's about, so I'm going to jump right into it. In this time where we can't touch people, where we can't get together with people, lots of holidays are coming up, cottage time, at least here in Toronto, we're not allowed to go to cottages. We want to stay at home. How do people deal with that sense of isolation, loneliness, maybe stress, anxiety? What would you suggest as some strategies to manage our emotions?
Well, I think the most important thing is to look at any crisis for its opportunities. And in this situation, maybe we actually are not able to distance or distract or deny our emotions in the way that we usually do, especially through our busyness. So I think that's the first thing, is to recognize that if you want to practice self-care, if that's important to you, if you want to thrive, then a feeling of loneliness or a feeling of isolation isn't a problem to solve or fix, but it's an opportunity to connect with yourself more fully. So I think that's the first answer, or the first part of the answer to your question, is to see that it's not just something that's awful or scary. It's a chance, a special chance to connect with yourself.
Yeah, and I really like that you touched on that, because what comes up for me is some of my clients have said to me, how dare I thrive, want to look for love when so many people are suffering and dying around the world? What would you say to that?
Well, I think this is a really important question at all times, not just this one. And the simple thing that I like to share about that question is that nobody ever suffered because somebody else was feeling joy, because somebody else was feeling love. As a matter of fact, the more joyful that you can feel, the more love you can find in your own heart, the more compassion will spill over for other people. So I think it's a reframe that can be really helpful for people to see that their willingness to feel good is a gift to themselves, and then to those around them, and even to those energetically beyond their sphere, that we're putting positive energy into the spaces that we all share globally. Joy and love don't, by their very nature, exclude other people. They're not selfish. So when you feel open and connected to yourself and open and connected to others, you also naturally look for opportunities to serve the highest good. And in that sense, it's really important to recognize that joy and love and other positive emotions aren't just for you. And with that recognition, I would offer anybody who's listening or watching total permission to feel as much uplift as possible, and then let the loving care that comes with that be part of your orientation.
Yeah. I really like that you've responded to it in that way, because it really helps us get out of that maybe victim place where, if other people are suffering, I don't have the right to have joy, to thrive. But you're actually having people notice that when you're actually happy, look at the impact, the ripple effect it has on the people around you, versus when you're really struggling, what's the impact on the people around you?
Yeah, absolutely. And also, the way I like to look at it is this: if I have the good fortune to be able to take advantage of the situation that I'm in other words, as so many people are, like, stuck at home, right? Well, I, for example, love to dance, and I have a big area of my living room with a hardwood floor, and I'm getting to dance more than I have, ever before, since this crisis began. So, when I think of people who are suffering, maybe they're sick or their family members are sick or they're on the front lines and there's a lot of fear and stress. I don't imagine them saying to me, stop dancing, like just sit there and feel bad. As a matter of fact, I think that, the way that in my own mind that I would see them and feel them responding is, if you're lucky enough to be able to dance, dance for us.
Yeah, dance for us. I'm just taking that in from someone who loves to dance as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, we get to make an impact in the world, even in our isolation. And so my next question for you is, I just had the question and it jumped out of my, oh yes, you alluded to it. You started to talk about how this might be an opportunity. So could you expand on that a little bit more?
Sure. Well, I think the spiritual perspective is, once we recognize what is happening in any moment, especially if we don't like or don't want it, instead of getting stuck on the idea that it happened to us for a reason, or we're supposed to deal with it in a particular way or understand it in a certain way, that I feel like it's more loving and healing to say, what is the opportunity for me here? And so in this particular crisis, we have an opportunity to look at what are the barriers that show up in us to accept as fully as possible what's happening, to move through it with as much acceptance as possible. And then we can say to ourselves, okay, rather than those being things that are wrong with us or bad, that those are the places to look for greater healing and openness. I like the idea that the obstacle is the vehicle. So if I notice that I hunker down, in times of stress, and I don't let myself connect to others, or if I lash out when I get stir crazy, these are places where I can bring renewed attention and acceptance to start to bring a different approach. So from that also, I can ask myself the question, what are the most helpful strategies that are available to me right now to thrive as much as possible in this difficult situation? And if I don't have those strategies, who can I ask or where can I look? So it's an opportunity mindset that is real and available at all times, but is especially valuable in crisis times.
Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about that. Acceptance. I can just hear some of the participants, the audience saying, how do you want me to accept something that's taking such a toll on humanity? So let's talk about, what is acceptance? Does it mean that I'm agreeing with it, that this is what's supposed to happen? Could you speak to that?
Sure. The best way to describe the acceptance that I'm pointing to is the idea that it is what it is. Whether I like it, whether I argue against it in my own mind, it's happening. And when I resist whatever is happening, then I get tighter, I get unhappier, I actually get less effective at bringing the best possible response to what is. So I always tell people that when you try to change a situation, when you're in resistance to it, it's like stomping on a hose with all of your might and then commanding the water to flow through. The harder that you stomp and the louder that you yell, the more the water is just going to back up. But if you can step off the hose and let the water of your experience, your sensations, your feelings flow through you, you come to a place of renewed presence where you can see the most clearly what needs to be done, and you can take action the most effectively. So if you want to actually be a source for positive change and for the highest good, the first crucial step is to actually look as clearly as possible at what's happening and really open to it. Just let it live inside of you and around you as it is, rather than arguing that it should be different.
Hmm. Yeah, I always use the example with my clients that I don't want this wall over here, but it's there, but I'm still pushing against it, and I don't want it to be there, but it's still there. And after a whole day and a week and a month, it actually gets exhausting. So you're talking about pushing up against what is so, what is a fact right now. This is how the world is, and we can get exhausted, grumpy, lash out at someone because of that push and that resistance, or we have the opportunity to accept what's so, which still may be a challenge for some of our listeners. So if they're coming up against that and finding that's a real challenge to just accept it the way it is, what would be a strategy, a way, a mindset shift maybe that they can start to employ to help them deal with the anxiety, the stress that comes up, especially if they're listening to the news, what's happening with the number of cases, how many borders are getting shut down, all of that?
Yeah, so here's my quick tip. Everybody who's listening to this or watching this, without knowing it, is already a world-class expert at acceptance. And the reason that I know that is true is because they would never look up at the sky and see a bird and say, that bird should be a dog, right? That would be insane, because they're so 100% in acceptance of that bird as it is in its birdness that it wouldn't even occur to them that it should be different. But then there are all of those birds in their life that they think should be dogs. You know, their parents should listen to them more. Their kids should respect them more. Their boss should not overwhelm them with so much work. And whenever that happens, I call that bird dogging. The idea that temporarily you're stuck thinking that whatever bird you're looking at should be a dog. So the first thing is recognizing that you already know what full acceptance is, because you practice it all the time, can give you a sense of renewed strength, like, oh, I do get this, I can do this. And then next, it gives you the opportunity to pay a really keen awareness to what happens inside of you when you do start bird dogging. And it's not just the big stuff like, you know, COVID, it's, you know, the person who stays in the bathroom too long in the house when you're all stuck together. It's the person whose laugh is annoying because it's so loud and there's nowhere to get away from it. So every time that you bird dog, you contract, you go tight. And that's not wrong or bad. And if we thought it was wrong or bad, then we would be bird dogging our very own bird dogging, which just makes it worse. But instead, it's like, oh, look at that. I just shut down. Can I turn and open to that shutdown? Can I breathe my way into it and through it to get back into that field of acceptance that I already know so well? So I think just playing with the whole idea of bird dogging and how to release it and recognizing what it's like when you're in complete acceptance, even if you thought you never were, I think that's a big help.
Yeah, and I really like that you've addressed that, because I was having a conversation with my sister earlier this week, and with something I was stressed about, and she said to me, Iris, your position is that it shouldn't be this way, but what if it was really supposed to be that way? And I thought, oh, and I could just release and let go instead of doing this resistance about something that I couldn't change anyway. And even as you're speaking, I can feel my body go, and just relax and just be. There's a beautiful gift in that.
Right, and actually the internal fight against something doesn't change that thing for the better, as we've talked about, but it makes you feel worse. So no one wins and you lose. And particularly when it comes to what we're talking about right now, I'm reminded of the words of the teacher Byron Katie, who says there are three kinds of business. There's my business, there's your business, and there's God's business. And when I'm in your business or God's business, I suffer unnecessarily. So whether this should be happening or not, that's not a question that a human can answer. That's not a question that I can answer. But more importantly, it's not even my business to try to answer it, because it's happening in a mysterious unfolding that none of us are in control of. And when I recognize that and I stop fighting what I can't do anything about and what isn't even my business to try to do anything about, then I can relax. And once I relax, I can become more present. And once I become more present, I can see if there is something for me to do that's my business, then I can take those steps.
Yeah, for me, my words are, what is it that I can impact or take charge of versus the things that I can't change, that aren't in my realm, in my skill set, and my ability to step in and change.
Right, and anybody who's had any connection with the 12-step movement knows the Serenity Prayer. And the Serenity Prayer is so beautiful because it asks us to be able to address the things we can change and to recognize the things that we can't. And I think that that's always really helpful, and it brings peace.
Yeah, and you're bringing to us that last line is the wisdom to know the difference. That's what you're inviting us to look at.
Right, absolutely.
All right, so I can tell you from my own experience that, I'm not dismissing the deaths and the suffering that's happening around the world, but in my little world, I'm so enjoying having my son and my partner home for every meal. My partner teaches running 3 times a week. My son plays hockey twice a week. No one can do anything. So we're at home, eating together, slowing down, doing things together. There's a whole lot more dishes and a whole lot more cooking, but there's a whole lot more togetherness. And for me, that's been the gift in this experience.
That's beautiful. I'm so glad that you've gotten to experience that. And I'm sure there are other people who are having that experience too. Still other people who are like at each other's throats because there's way too much closeness. And then there's other people who are sheltering alone.
Yes.
And they don't have that opportunity. But in each case, what we're talking about, starting with acceptance, and let's even expand that a little bit forward to include a soft welcoming to whatever is scratchy, whatever is hard, whatever taps into our wounding, just to be able to say, okay, I've got time, I've got space. So come on in, all parts of me. Come on in, all wounds in me. Take a place at the table inside of me. You're included, you matter, you're precious to me because you're a part of who I am. So going back to the opportunity that we were speaking about earlier, this is definitely an opportunity to practice that kind of welcoming that is really the heart of healing.
Yeah, I can even feel like my whole core just soften as I think about that self-welcoming. There's the part of me that makes things happen, that takes action, that can be given permission to not be speaking right now. To just take a back step for when I do need that part of me, and let the other part of me, and I'm going to call it that more intimate, vulnerable part, be willing to welcome what is right now, even though it may not be my ideal.
Absolutely.
So if people are dealing with loneliness and they welcome that, a soft welcome of the loneliness, is there, I guess the question that comes up for me, is there a part of us that battles what is as a way to control? Is it something that we learned in childhood? Is it just the human condition? What do you think about that?
Well, I think first of all that it's built into our brains through evolution. We push away, or we run away, or we repress things that we don't like or don't want. Because of the way our brains actually develop through the course of evolution. But this process of soft welcoming and acceptance actually rewires our brain. And so that's the important thing to take away from this. But in terms of what you were talking about before with somebody who's lonely, when you bring a soft welcoming to the experience of lonely in your body, which may be a hurt in your chest, or it may be a pulling in your belly, or it may be tears coming down your eyes, then what's happening is that the relationship inside of you between your awareness and your experience is being highlighted and strengthened. And so the part of you that's lonely is actually being met, in which case it's not lonely. It's being met internally. And of course, there are times when we'd much rather be touched by someone else or held by someone else or accepted by someone else. But the truth is, you can meet your own profound loneliness and in that practice become connected, and that lets the loneliness be met and shift and bring you greater peace, greater just relaxation and openness. So the relationship that you have to your own experience of loneliness is as important, and maybe sometimes even more important, than what you seek in connection outside of yourself.
Yeah, and I really like that, because often we get focused on the people outside of that ourselves, women that are single or dating or looking at men and saying that, they're not emotionally available. But we also want to start to look at us over here. What's my capacity to be with those emotions that I don't like, that we call negative? I don't want to feel lonely. So what do we do to avoid loneliness? Do we, now we can't shop, but do you clean the house? Do you play video games? Do you watch Netflix? What is your way to run away from these emotions that, Raphael, you're inviting us to deepen our capacity? And I don't know that we can love what we call our negative emotions, but they start to not be so big or so overwhelming, or maybe not so frightening. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, the way I like to say it is that you don't have to like your difficult feelings, but you actually do have to love them. And what I mean by love is exactly what we've been talking about: letting them in, letting them be a part of you. I'll give a quick example, because you were talking about relationships and dating just a moment ago. I worked with a woman once who said that what sabotaged all of her relationships was her neediness. Not just lonely, but the neediness. And I asked her, using the approach that you and I are describing right now, would she be able to actually connect with, let in and allow, and even be attentive and caring towards the part of her that was needy? And she said, absolutely not. I would like to surgically remove it from my being, because if it wasn't there, then I would have everything I want. And it was a tough moment, right? Because I could see how identified she was against that neediness. But I had one card that I could pull, which was to say to her, your issue that you shared with me is about abandonment and rejection by your parents. And I'm wondering if you can see that when you want to surgically remove the needy part of you, you're actually abandoning and rejecting a key part of your own experience. And therefore, you're continuing the work of your parents on yourself. And for her, of course, that was the only lever that I could pull, because the last thing that she wanted was to be identified with those parents who had wounded her so seriously. And it gave her a chance to just say, okay, let me just try. What's to lose by trying to hold that neediness and connect to it as if I was a good friend to it, as if I cared about it, as if I put my arm around it and said, you belong. I'll stay connected with you. I'll see what you need. And that little window that opened up gave her the opportunity to shift her perspective in the way we've been talking about, and really created healing and change for her.
Yeah, I actually got goosebumps as you talked about that, because she's perpetuating her experience from her parents. And, for single women that are out there dating, we're often looking outside of ourselves to get what we need. And I always say we're only as needy as our unmet needs. And this is an opportunity for us to go inwards and recognize, as you said, that part of us that I call it our inner child that has their hands up. It's like, pick me up. I need something. I need to be soothed. I need to be held. I need to be comforted. And as the adult, you're going, shh, be quiet, stay in the corner, shut the door. I don't want to see you. And we actually have an opportunity to be with that little one inside of us that just needs the adult to say, it's okay, I'm here for you.
Yeah, one of the most haunting quotes I ever heard or read was from a British writer named Kenneth Tynan. And he said, we seek the teeth to match our wounds. And that's another way of saying that what you resist inside, you keep recreating outside of yourself. But it also comes back around to the opportunity. We've been talking about opportunity today. From my perspective, when you heal because you welcome in and allow yourself to feel those hurt and wounded and broken places in yourself, then your wounds don't, the healing, the scarring, the making whole takes away the place where those teeth from that quote can bite down and get in. So they try a little bit, like, hey, where are you, codependent person that I was using before to get my own needs met? But like there's nowhere to chomp, and then they get bored pretty quickly and they go and look for somebody else who's wounded like you were, and that gives you the opportunity to actually start attracting people to you who are more, able to love you rather than to use you. So recognizing that we seek the teeth to match our wounds also gives the potential solution to that dilemma as well.
And certainly the motivation to do something about those pieces of us we just want to disown and put in the dark.
Right, because the whole point of that story about the woman who wanted to surgically remove the needy part of herself was that she was guaranteeing that each relationship would show up with that same pattern again and again and again. Because until you heal the wound, you can't take apart the pattern and create something different.
Yeah, and I can tell you from my own experience, for many years, having that wound of feeling very needy and picking partners that match that wound, which just reinforced my neediness. And it's so easy when you're dating to look outside of you and say there's something wrong out there, that they can't give me what I need, which is very powerless, very much of a victim, versus what's the work that I need to do to heal those pieces so that I never pick the same type of partner again. I pick a partner who can contribute to me rather than reflect that wound deep inside of me, that I'm dying to have somebody heal for me. But often when we put that onus on somebody outside of us, we just get re-triggered and re-wounded. It's like when that wound doesn't heal, it just gets cut open and cut open again. And you're inviting our listeners to take this opportunity to heal that inner wound so that we start to shift the kind of partners that we pick.
Yeah, and I think taking that message back into this time of isolation for most of us, this gives us a chance to look at the difference between being reactive versus responsive. So when we're reactive, we have a feeling that we don't like or want, like loneliness or neediness, as we've been talking about. And we instantly set about trying to get rid of that feeling. And we may act it out through our choice of dating or relationship partners, as you're describing. But we also may act it out in the moment. We may feel hurt, and then we may act it out as anger, trying to take the difficult feeling that we're having and give it to someone else. But that's all based on our inability to actually stay present to the unwanted experience. And so becoming responsive means growing in our what's called distress tolerance. We have a difficult experience internally, but we turn toward it with the welcoming that you've been talking about, and me too, and we breathe into it, we notice it, we allow it, we let it lead us for a while, and we pay attention to it. And in just a minute, usually, or two at the most, we come back into a wholeness of presence. And from that place, we can be responsive in a way that serves us and serves other people. So what so many people don't know is that just a minute of discomfort takes them to the heart of the matter, allows that healing to happen, and then gives them all kinds of freedom about what they do next. So this time of isolation is part of the opportunity we've been talking about, is to practice distress tolerance. And it's not even to say, don't go for the ice cream or the TV or anything like that. but just give it a holy, sacred pause. Give yourself 1 minute. You can even set a timer on your phone. Like, I don't like the way I'm feeling right now. I don't like what's happening. I'm edgy, I'm irritable, or I'm hurting. So just how about 1 minute of welcoming and see what you feel like after that 1 minute. If you want the ice cream after that, maybe you'll have it, but maybe you'll have it more mindfully as well. Slower, less of it. Or maybe you won't want it as much anymore. So a time of isolation with a lot less busyness is a great opportunity to practice distress tolerance, to move from being reactive to responsive.
So this kind of addresses what we talked about earlier, how people are avoiding their discomfort by going to some kind of addiction. It can be capital A or can be a small A, like watching TV, eating food, tidying the house. What's the gift in growing our, what did you just call it? Our discomfort tolerance? Or was another word for it?
Distress tolerance. Distress tolerance.
Okay. What's the gift in growing that capacity?
Well, let's look at it like this. When you're in resistance to any particular emotional experience, or physical experience for that matter, your life is run by your resistance to that experience. You don't make choices that are in your highest good. You make choices that are about avoiding that thing. And so when you learn to be able to tolerate and move through that which has been impossible to do before, you actually become free. So you can make choices that are in your highest good and in the highest good of others. So to answer your question very directly, what's in it for me, as any of your listeners or watchers might wonder, it's your freedom.
Yeah, as I take that in, because one of my biggest resistances in life is there's not enough time, and the rushing and the being 3 minutes late, in that the technology wouldn't work. It was just going around in circles, and that whole conversation of it's not professional and I'm hoping it's going to get on, should I hang up and go back again, and all of that inner resistance to try and push through something that wasn't going to change any faster than it was going to change. That as I look at just being with that distress of we're 3 minutes late, and just breathing into it, it's like I don't feel that rush, that intensity of making things happen.
Well, one of the things that's really important to notice in the conversation that we're having is the role of stress. And there are lots of different aspects to stress, but one of the most significant that we all face is having more to do than the time that we have to do it in. And that is a natural stress producer. That doesn't even mean that stress is all wrong or all bad. But when we start to react to that stress, then we increase its negative impact on us. If we realize, oh, my body's starting to tighten up, my heart's beating, my fists are getting clammy, let me see if I can breathe into that. Okay, there is more to do now than I have to do in this moment, or I'm late, for example. So once I accept that, then I have the opportunity to go into a kind of a triage mode, which is to say, I can't do everything right now. What's the most important thing that I can do in this very moment to move things forward in the way that I would like? And once I recognize that, I have a small task, I can focus on it, and I also can realize I'm doing all I can do. I can't do more. So therefore, I don't have to keep fighting against the stress. I can actually start to mitigate it through that process that I just described. So there are things that happen all the time in life that create stress, like our baby screaming and needs us while also the stove, sometimes burning on the stove, or our other kid is yelling or breaking something in the living room. It's too much. And that's real. But if I accept that I'm in a very stressful moment, I'm overwhelmed, there's too much to do, okay, what can I do right now? What can I do first? And I start focusing on this moment, this moment, this moment. As much as possible, I reduce the stress instead of increase it.
Now, what I can tell you that I got out of this conversation personally, and I don't know if you can see it, is probably 5 times in our conversation, my body's just gone, oh.
Mm.
In that presence and awareness and having choice. I now have choice. I don't have to battle time. If I'm aware of it, I have the choice to what I call leaning into it, or the soft welcoming of, yes, there's a lot of stuff on my plate. And yes, I can get this much done. And yes, it's a time that, with all the series that I'm putting together, that there is a lot coming at me, and I can do what I can do and welcome it, rather than be in resistance of like, oh my God, I still got 15 things on my list that I have to do, and this kind of intensity, and calling my partner going, I need a hug right now. And it's great that I have him to help me calm down, but I actually have an opportunity to do that inner work for myself. Like, you can even hear the shift in my tone of voice, the cadence, to just be. And this is kind of my work, my goal, to learn to be in the state more often. I don't know that I can always be in there, but have the awareness that when I shift out of it, I now have choice to bring myself back to this place.
Yeah, so there's two things I want to draw on from what you're describing. The first one is that you're letting your whole body hold and express your intelligence. Because we have brain intelligence for sure, but we also have heart intelligence, we have gut intelligence, and we also even have intelligence in every one of our cells. And so your willingness and your practice to notice, oh, that caused a softening in me, or I noticed I exhaled when I heard that. You're accessing the sum total of your wisdom by including your felt sensations in your body. And that's a real gift for anybody. So I'm really glad that you're demonstrating that. The other thing that I want to say is that a lot of times the busyness is self-created. And I'll speak about my own issues with that to give people a sense of what I mean. So what happens is that there's, let's say, an hour, and I cram too much into that hour.
I know that one.
But if I slow down and I ask what's happening, it's because I'm kind of greedy. Like, I want more experience than the time allows. But if I also move into that sense of greediness and I drop through it to something more truthful, what I find is a sense of deprivation, that there's not enough. There's not going to be enough for me. I have to give away my time and my energy to others. I'm not going to get what I want. I'm not going to get what I need. And so when I don't welcome that sense of deprivation that I just described, and I therefore don't soften into a greater relaxed presence in which I might be able to drop this thing or not try to get that magazine article done before my next client call. When I do those things, it's much better. When I don't do those things, the stress increases, and then I can get really mad at the stress and forget the fact that it was my own resistance that created that cycle in the first place.
Just talking about this brings tears to my eyes, which is another level of me of releasing that energy that runs the whole day, of going from one thing to the interview, to the client appointments, to the admin, everything that needs to get done. And it's just releasing and just being.
Yeah, you got it.
Thank you. This was this was a gift for our viewers, but it was a gift for me too. Thank you so much.
Oh, it's my great pleasure. And anybody who has any questions about any of this, I'd invite them to go to my website, which is Cushnir.com. That's Cushnir.com. They can email me. But also what I want to share as just something to offer during this difficult time is that on my website, under the resources tab, there are guided emotional surfing meditations that you can download to your phone or your tablet. They're totally free, and they have my voice and music, or not, depending on your preference, guiding you into the welcoming that we were talking about. Because that welcoming is a muscle that needs to be worked. It takes a while to get used to turning toward what you've spent so much time turning away from previously. So you can download them, you can listen to them, grow the muscle until you don't need them anymore, and then you can delete them because you can do it on your own.
With that, Raphael, I've interviewed you so many times and I've gotten so many nuggets of wisdom that I use with my own coaching clients about riding the wave of the emotions, this softening right now. I want to thank you for this time that you've given us, for the strategies you've created, the extra resources you've posted, and for the difference you make in the world.
Thanks so much, and thanks to you for hosting this and offering it to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.